Hello everyone, my name is Brian Wiggins. I am a professional grappler, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach, and kind of a semi-professional skeptic, a little bit of a cynic, because man, sometimes when you just hear something new, it's just, this has got to be crap, right? And today we're going to be taking a really hard look at ecological dynamics, or what some people are calling the ecological approach. People who are saying, I teach by not teaching any technique at all. And in my head, I'm saying this is total and complete bullshit. How are you teaching without teaching anything at all? Is this just some new wave crap that's just not going to work? And it turns out that it's based on something called ecological dynamics, this ecological approach. Let's take a deeper dive. So there are basically two schools of thought when it comes to how our brains acquire and process new skills and new information. Version one, the more traditional version, is called info processing. This basically means that our brains operate like computers. We feed data into it just by thinking about it, by drilling it. Think like typical traditional drilling. We just memorize things, we absorb that information, and then when it comes time for us to use that information, we see the situation, we recognize what we need to do, we retrieve that information from our data banks, and then run the program, essentially. That is info processing. A much newer version of, or interpretation of how our brains possibly process new information and acquire skills is called ecological dynamics. This says that skill acquisition works much better when the learning actually mimics how it will really be used. So that's the ecological part. If we're putting ourselves into the real world, we will learn it better with that immersion or a version of that immersion. So think in this case, instead of traditional sparring, which is what info processing looks like, this is more positional sparring, where we're going to get a real world taste of what that skill might look like. Now, the problem that we run into here, there's a lot of misinterpretation for what ecological dynamics actually is. So what is it actually? So ecological dynamics does not mean that there is no instruction whatsoever. It means that the instruction is embedded into the tasks that are representing what it is that we should be doing. And those tasks should require some decision making. It should require adaptation. So it's not going to be the exact same every single time. And we should get some real time feedback on what it is that we're doing. So it's getting away from this rote memorization. Again, if we use this traditional drilling model, that's rote memorization. Just drill it until you have it right, and then we're going to go roll, and then you'll be able to do it. Whereas ecological dynamics is saying, no, we need to have way more context involved in this, because that's how our brains are going to learn. There are two major parts to ecological dynamics. The first one is perception-action coupling. So what this is saying is that athletes don't see something, decide what to do, and then do the thing. Athletes are perceiving and acting virtually at the same time. They are seeing opportunities for movement, and these opportunities arise from how you and your opponent are interacting with each other, right? So it's not like, oh, I see an armbar, I should do an armbar. It's more about, as we're recognizing those opportunities, we're immediately clicking into that action to go for that armbar. We're recognizing when someone's position, their body position is in the right place for me to hit a sweep. So it's a lot more is happening at the same time, as opposed to the sequential see, decide, act. The other thing that really comes into ecological dynamics, according to the theoretical framework, is that constraints shape behavior. So what does this mean? It means that movement or action, we'll say, isn't set to a specific set of circumstances. again, if we come back to this idea of traditional drilling or drilling, oh, it's this really specific circumstance when this happens. I need to wait for all of these things to be perfect for me to hit a scissor sweep. Ecological dynamics says that that doesn't really happen because we're in a chaotic environment. So that movement and action isn't tied to this specific set of circumstances. It is determined by constraints. What kind of constraints? Well, we have individual constraints, which are how we go about making decisions, which is our individual strength. What is our flexibility? How fatigued are we in the moment? What injuries do we have? All the things that are unique to us in that moment that are not controlled by the immediate environment or by our opponent. There are constraints that are determined by the task we are trying to achieve. So think of it like the rules that we're going by right now. These could be the gym rules. No ankle locks if you're a white belt, if that's a rule in your gym. It could be social rules, how hard you're going to go with your opponent, that you don't immediately start going a million miles an hour, giving 100%, or, you're trying to be a little nice to someone and not smash them immediately if you're an advanced belt rolling against the brand new person, right? So we have some social rules. That's going to constrain some of our decision making. Maybe we're in a competition. That's going to change some of the rules. What are we allowed and not allowed to do within that competition? Task constraints could also include the specific task that we are trying to accomplish. Are we trying to submit? Are we trying to escape? Are we trying to score points? What is it in this very moment that I'm trying to do, the most immediate task right in front of me? What is our opponent doing in this very moment? That is included in the environment because that's going to dictate what we do and how we apply the different skills that we have. So that's a major part. Our actions, our movement is determined by these constraints. We're operating within this framework. Ecological dynamics says that skills should be adaptable and just not mindlessly repeated. Athletes generally are adapting to what they can make of the chaos in that moment. It's not that, well, I'm not in this specific situation, so I can't throw a punch here because they're not in the right place and I'm not in the right place. No, they're adapting what they know to the current chaos that they are inhabiting. The principles, though, stay the same. Throwing a punch does not change, regardless of the chaos around us. The basic principles of how to throw a punch, the basic principles of how to block someone from regaining guard, to sweep someone, to hit a submission, to pass the guard. The principles underlying how this works, ecological dynamics says, do not change. It's just everything around it. And that's what we're adapting to the current situation. Another, we'll say the last major tenet that we'll be discussing right now about ecological dynamics is that it says that learning should represent the real world. And there's definitely science behind this. Skills are more readily acquired and retained and recalled when they are learned in situations that have context and resistance. One of the very first videos I did was about how to drill properly, right? That it's not 10,000 reps, that we know that our brains learn better for motor recall when there is context to what it is that we're doing. We see how it fits into the greater whole, the environment, one might say, and that there should be some resistance because it's going to feel very different to just drill a move with someone who's allowing us to do the move versus when there is resistance and now we have to make adaptations as we go. So that's the basic framework of ecological dynamics. If I had to sum it up, it would be ecological dynamics says we learn best through discovery as opposed to just rote memorization. Okay, now the way my brain works is whenever I see anything new, I want to try to break it. I want to see what are the limits of this thing, whatever it is. How are the different ways this could go wrong? Now, in some ways, this is kind of ecological dynamics in motion, seeing how everything works together. That's how my ADHD brain works. I want to see all the parts. But at first blush, I see some major holes in the framework of ecological dynamics as applied to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So let's take a look at a couple of these. The first one that I see is that there is still a need for basic information. There is a baseline of knowledge that you absolutely must have in order to make use of ecological dynamics. So what do I mean by this? So let's say I don't speak a word of Spanish, but I would like to learn how to speak Spanish. Well, someone could airdrop me into Madrid and tell me, you need to find out how much a cup of coffee costs. Great. Well, if I don't know how to say cuánto cuesta, which is how much is, in Spanish, I'm not going to be able to find out how much a cup of coffee costs. I won't be successful at this, or it'll take a really long time for me to figure out how to say those first two words, cuánto cuesta. You need to learn certain things before you can just go and discover all of the other stuff. So applied to jiu-jitsu, if someone doesn't understand the basic words and maneuvers of jiu-jitsu, they won't be able to efficiently discover how to escape, how to apply submissions. Even if they watch someone do the submission, do the pass, do the escape, they can watch it, and there is value to watching it, but it's going to be very inefficient. They might be able to figure out some of it over a long course of time, but think about all the little details that go into even a simple like side control escape, into a simple pass, into an armbar. If they don't know all the details, it's going to take them, again, a fuckload of time in order for them to figure out all of those details that they're missing that's preventing them from being successful. So having some baseline knowledge is, in my interpretation of this, absolutely required in order to make use of that discovery tool, because you don't know what you don't know, right? That's on like the specific jiu-jitsu side of things. Now let's look at the more practical, they say the business side. Let's say you're a gym owner. Well, if someone is paying, if I'm going into a gym and I'm paying the monthly fee to go take jiu-jitsu class, I don't want to be told, go discover it for yourself. Hey, sensei, hey, coach, how do I stop being triangled all the time? Well, keep working at it. You'll eventually figure it out. Are you kidding me? No, I'm paying you money every month. Show me how the to do this. Don't to me, that's a bit of a cop-out, right? Oh, go figure it out. You'll discover it. To me, just practically, that's not what your customers, that's not what your students want. And here's the other thing. Most students that you have are not professional, high-level, skilled athletes. These are people who work regular jobs. They might be very recreational in this. Maybe they compete maybe once, maybe twice a year. At the end of the day, they've been at work all day. They've been dealing with family stuff, work stuff. Their boss has been yelling at them. Customers are yelling at them. They don't necessarily have the mental bandwidth at the end of the day to invest in discovering how to do jiu-jitsu on their own. Discovery takes a lot of mental bandwidth. It takes attention. It takes recall. And at the end of the day, you're mentally exhausted. So even if they were open to the idea, they may not be able to make the best use of that, and that could stall their progress. The other thing I'll say from a business standpoint, and also I'll say generally as a practitioner standpoint, because I think that we should try to get as many people who are interested involved in jiu-jitsu as possible. I think there's a lot of benefits to doing it. But if someone feels a really high degree of frustration, such as not knowing how to escape from bad positions and being told to figure it out and having to take a long time to figure out all those details and discover the details by themselves, it is more likely that that person is going to quit than to try to discover the skills for themselves. Even if the long-term outcomes are going to be much better. Even if we can show quantitatively that by learning this way, your jiu-jitsu will be orders of magnitude better than someone who just does rote memorization. Even if we could show that, if someone does not have a very high threshold for frustration and self-discovery, they're going to quit. So not only are you losing people, you're now losing gym fees. You're losing customers and you need people to come into the gym in order to pay for the rent and the lights and all the other stuff. So there's some practical issues that we can see with ecological dynamics when we apply it to jiu-jitsu, that just blindly saying, go discover for yourself is not really the best framework. There is research, there is data that shows that the ecological dynamics model is a better learning model than info processing, than the traditional just go memorize it, drill it until you can't drill it wrong model. There is data that backs this up. So how do we reconcile this model that says discovery and not doing direct instruction is the best way to do it? How do we reconcile that with quite literally decades of established practice and people who have been insanely successful doing it this old traditional way? Well, there's a few ways we can look at this. Theoretical science doesn't always explain every situation. In anytime we learn something new about how the body works, we're always going to be able to point to, well, this guy and this group of people over here is doing it this way and it works great for them. Okay, true. This is merely a theoretical framework that gives us an idea of how we think the brain works given our current body of knowledge. It could be that in another year or 5 years or 10 years, we make some new discovery about how our brain processes information that turns ecological dynamics on its head. We don't know. We're just looking at what we know right now, and as best as we can, this is the model that scientists are saying works to explain how we learn best. All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is drilling still works. I mean, ask every world champion. I'm going to say that at least 95, if not 99% of them will tell you that they drilled a lot. Drilling still works. Traditional drilling likely works because it's combined with live reps later. Most people, if you think about most typical classes, even if we'll call the traditional drilling at the beginning of class, a lot of times there's positional sparring. That's a normal part of class. And then we go to live sparring where maybe you're trying to, if you're smart, you're trying to implement what you just learned that day while it's fresh in your head. So traditional drilling still plays a role in this context, in this class structure, because we're seeing those ecological dynamics principles applied later in class. So that could explain or reconcile why people who did traditional drilling still had great success, because there were some elements of ecological dynamics in their learning process. Why else? Well, drilling works because good, smart drilling that uses resistance, which is not atypical, this is not uncommon in a gym, and positional sparring, it's very effective. We know this is effective. We've known this has been effective for a while now. If not from the science standpoint, we know it from the practical standpoint. And that actually fits into the ED framework. It's basically, we've already been doing some, if not a lot of stuff. It's just that now we have a term and a framework to explain what it is that we're doing. Now, here's the thing. Let's just say, for example, that we're not even putting into place positional sparring, that we're just sticking to traditional drilling. We drill, we roll. All right. Traditional drilling still activates the neural pathways for learning. It just might be that it's not the most effective and efficient way to do so, but it's still doing it. Okay? I can walk to the store or I can drive to the store. Either way, I'm getting to the store. One's going to get me there faster. That's what ecological dynamics is saying. It's not saying that there is zero value in traditional drilling. It's just saying there's a better way of doing this. Traditional drilling is not bad. It's just the best way to put this is it's incomplete if it's isolated. If it's not being used in a greater context of, say, positional sparring, resistance, live rolls, trying to figure it out, and teaching principles of how these things actually work. So it's not that traditional drilling is bad. It's not that it doesn't work. So don't take that away. And if people are telling you that, if you're hearing that in the social media sphere, on TikTokers and podcasts and all these like yahoos out in left field, oh no, traditional drilling doesn't work. It is patently untrue. It is demonstrably untrue. It's just they're offering a very, at best, we'll say unnuanced, and at worst, uninformed view of how these things actually work. The trick here, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Don't throw out what's been working just because you saw something shiny. All right. You have an arm bar that works really, really well. You've been hitting that arm bar off, but then you see a new version of the arm bar, or better yet, you see the brand new submission, the Scottish Twister. Saw a few videos of that in MMA fights. It looks really cool. You don't abandon your armbar game that has been serving you so well for so long just to exclusively do the Scottish Twister. No. You can try adding that new thing in while maintaining the stuff that already still works for you. So the other thing you need to think about is that people learn differently. Individuals, we're all individuals. And yes, our brains generally work under the same concepts of learning, but everyone learns differently. So where a very strongly pushed ecological dynamics model might work for some people, there are still others that need more rote traditional drilling because that's how their brain structure actually works. As coaches, we need to meet our students where they are, and we need to recognize different learning styles. My wife teaches high school Spanish. She's been doing so for a long time now. And universally, across every school she's taught at, she is recognized as one of the best teachers there. And a reason for that is because as she structures her classroom and how she's teaching, she attempts to hit all the different learning styles. So that way, every student has an opportunity to absorb the information the way that works best for them. We need to do the same in class. So how can we best apply ecological dynamics as we currently understand the field as it actually is, not the extreme version that some people are touting out there? How do we apply this and incorporate this into our teaching during class? Well, the first thing we should be thinking about is breaking down jiu-jitsu into minimal variable units, the smallest piece of information that still makes sense within the jiu-jitsu context. So for example, this could be simple movements, right? Shrimping is a minimal variable unit. We know that if we teach shrimping by itself, this can be applied in a lot of different situations. It is a basic movement, right? Sprawling, hand fighting, which is a little bit more complex, but the principles of, hey, I want to keep on the inside. I want to keep controls. I want to keep them from getting inside on me. Overhooks, hooking, having good hooks with the feet. How does this work? Body pressure. How much pressure am I generating when I'm on top? These are small units that make sense on their own that we can then apply into other situations. So we want to teach that, right? Always be getting down to those fundamental principles. Now, a minimal variable unit could also be something like a submission. I believe that a submission is a minimal variable unit. Why? Because arm bars work the same from every single position. We are trying to do the exact same thing. We are controlling the shoulder. We are leveraging the wrist in order to break the elbow every single time. All submissions are like that. So if we teach the basics of how the submission works, it can then be applied to any position. So that is a minimal variable unit. So we want to teach those things. Again, ecological dynamics does not say zero instruction. It does not say zero training. It does presuppose a baseline of knowledge for us to move forward and make discoveries on our own. So as we're teaching these, we want to focus on the fundamental principles that make these things work, why we're doing them. This, I mean, if we really think about it, if we think about the macro of what we're trying to teach, this is ultimately what we're trying to get our students to learn, right? We want them to understand why the armbar works. We just might not be thinking about that while we're teaching it, but that generally is the end goal. So What do we want to teach them? We want to teach them the underlying mechanics that make, say, this submission work. The mechanics are, I secure this joint, I lever this joint to break this joint, right? Why does this sweep work? Well, the sweep works because I'm always, in every sweep, getting my center of gravity under their center of gravity and levering them away. I'm taking away their ability to post out, to keep them from being tipped over, get to those base principles as we're teaching the basic stuff. Yes, we should have them drill the technique. Now, does this mean traditional drilling go right out the window because it doesn't involve self-discovery? Absolutely not. If someone is just learning a technique for the very first time, there is a certain amount of slow-mo traditional drilling that is going to work really well right here, so that way they can see all the details and absorb those details. So let them do traditional drilling for, say, 5 reps. It doesn't have to be a ton of reps. 5 is probably going to be enough just to get the basic movement and the idea down so they can feel where the pressure should be, where they should be, lever points, all of that. Then, once they've done it 5 times, just to get the motion down, have them drill it another, say, 5 to 10 times. But now their partner is going to offer them 85% resistance. If they make a mistake, like they're trying to go for the arm bar and they don't have everything closed off, the opponent yanks the arm out. Let there be resistance. That is going to really start getting into the ED structure of having resistance and how might this really feel in a real world situation, right? Then we can drill it a little bit further, but in a different context. We can apply constraints. So maybe now after they've drilled it 5 times trad, 5 to 10 times with resistance, with some decent resistance, not 100%, but enough to get an idea of how it's going to feel. Now have them do positional sparring. And that's going to allow them the opportunity to apply the technique. So give them some specific goals. So for example, if we were teaching the principles of getting out of side control, have them start in side control. Person on bottom has a goal. They need to get into a scoring position by any means necessary. Within rules, obviously. You're not going to give them a wet willy or fish hook them out of there, right? Person on top has some rules. They can only submit from side control. So by having this positional sparring drill have rules around it, it is going to allow for guided discovery as opposed to just a free-for-all where it's okay, go to drilling or go to sparring, start on your knees, start standing, whatever. And they may never get into the place where it allows them to practice discovering how to get out of side control or practice how to submit from side control. By putting the constraints around it this way, it allows you to make sure that they have the opportunity to discover how these principles can work as opposed to, say, a free-for-all where they may never get to that position, right? This is guided discovery, all right? Now, how else can we apply ecological dynamics into our classes? And again, my guess is that you're already doing this. We're just being specific and naming it for what it is, understanding the why behind what we do, I think is an important thing. So ask a lot of questions. So whenever a student comes to you asking you, hey, this isn't working, or how do I do this, or whatever, rather than just feed them the answer, start by asking them more questions. I think this is just a good coaching technique anyway. This is going to allow you to get more context and understand what they're actually asking. What are they really asking here? Where is their real problem? The other thing is that by asking them questions, you can guide them to maybe discover the answer for themselves, guided discovery, as opposed to just saying, well, I can't get out of side control. How do I do that? Well, what were you trying to do? I was trying to stick my arm in there and it wasn't working. Okay, well, try again and see what happens. See if you can fix it. That's not really helpful, right? Asking more questions, allowing them to kind of discover where they're making a mistake or what detail is missing. That's where we can be better as coaches, where we're still letting our knowledge guide the process, but not just feeding them the information, not making them work for it at all. All right? I think there's a lot of benefit to that. Another thing we should be doing, whether you're calling it the ecological approach or ecological dynamics or whatever, you should absolutely foster an atmosphere where questions are allowed to be asked and should be asked. If no one ever has any questions, whenever you say, hey, does anyone have any questions about this? That's usually not true. People have questions. It's just, why are they afraid to ask the question? Is it that they're afraid of looking stupid, dumb, uninformed? Are they embarrassed by asking the question? Are they afraid about what your response might be? These are good things you should be asking yourself. If no one has any questions ever, I highly doubt it's because you were such an effective teacher that you just were able to get everything into their brain all at once. Now, it might be that you say, hey, do you have any questions? No. And then they start drilling, rolling, whatever, and then they have questions. That's perfectly fine. But we always want them to be open to asking those questions, because that's how they're going to discover solutions to their problems, right? Because then that gets us back to us asking them questions. Also, you need to allow for mistakes and discovery. So it's not about doing it perfectly every time. We've known for a long time that the brain learns better by making mistakes rather than doing something perfectly. So it's about moving with intention and learning from our mistakes and figuring things out that way. So it's not about like the second they do something imperfectly, nope, we're going to correct that because it needs to be perfect form every single time. Well, no, because then they're going to be afraid about not doing it perfectly, and that's probably going to lead to more issues. The other thing is that if you showed someone the principles and now they're able to hit the move in a different way, they're not doing it the exact same way that you did it, but they can do so reliably and with the same desired outcome, then don't feel the need to correct them back to this desired form. Oh, that's not how I taught it. You did it this way, and even though it worked, I want you to do it this way, the way I taught it. That's ego talking, right? If it's getting them to the same place and it's not going to cause someone more physical harm than is intended. So, for example, they find a new way of applying a submission, but man, every time they do it, there is a very, very high risk that you're just going to rip someone's knee apart as opposed to being controlled and allowing someone the time to tap. That's where I would say, okay, that's where we want to step in. A perfect example of this is there is a traditional, or I don't want to say correct, but accepted way of applying the guillotine choke from mount, right? It's basically the same guillotine, reaching in, grabbing my wrist, boom, arching, and then hitting the choke, right? But watch Sean Brady do that in the UFC. Watch Sean Brady, because he used to do this to us all the time. And every time we see him land this submission in any of his fights, we just, all right, game over. He does a one-armed guillotine where he just gets that one arm in, he gets it deep, and he arches it back, and he puts people to sleep with this. It's not just a neck crank. It's not just, his very first UFC fight, he put the guy to, or not the first, I think it was the second fight, he put the dude to sleep. I forget which one. It was one of those fights. But traditional logic would tell you that's not going to work. But for Sean, it works every time he does it. He found a way that works for him. He's able to do it reliably. So why are you going to correct that, right? So if your students, I'm not saying your students are all going to be Sean Brady, but there are ways that you can let your students kind of discover how to do things on their own and make it their own. So bottom line, is ecological dynamics, or the ecological approach, is it complete and utter bullshit? No. It is based in actual research and it's backed with data. This is not some new age thing that someone just made up one day and started putting it into practice. Odds are you are probably already doing some, if not a lot or most, of what ecological dynamics says works within its framework. You're probably already doing a lot of it. This just explains why it works. It offers more specifics and it offers you some context and maybe some more, a way to go even deeper on it. Now, you might hear, I'll say charitably, less knowledgeable proponents. And I'm not claiming to be the most knowledgeable person in the world about this by any stretch of the imagination, but people who just basically read the headline or they read the abstract and didn't try to get any deeper into how ED actually works, they will tout an extreme version of this, which, hey, look, if it works for them and their students love it, great. You do you, mazel tov, have a great time doing it, but don't feel the need to follow that example. It's an extreme example and it could just be a one-off. And is it that it's actually working for them? I don't know. We don't know the quality of the jiu-jitsu players that they're turning out. Because people are only starting to adopt it like recently, it's going to be a few years before we might see, does this work on the world stage? If we see people who come from a pure extreme version of ecological dynamics and they start just on the regular running through ADCC worlds, they start running through IBJJF, awesome, then cool. We were all wrong, they were all right. I doubt it's going to go that way though. As coaches, we should always be open to finding new ways to reach out to our students, better ways to pass on our knowledge. We always need to be open to that, because then if we don't, we become stagnant as coaches. So we should always be on the lookout for something new and try it out, but we should be like Bruce Lee, right? Be like Bruce Lee, use what works, dump the rest, right? So maybe some of this will work. I would say give it a shot. See if it's working. Maybe tweak a few things. If it works, great. If it doesn't, listen, the way you were teaching, if you're still turning on people who are showing up to class, enjoying what they do, and if you have competitors and they are doing well on the mats when they compete, then great. You're doing a great job. So that is Ecological Dynamics in a nutshell. Let me know in the comments if you're already using some of this, or if you completely disagree with my take on it, that either it is complete and total crap and doesn't work, or if only the extreme version worked. Let me know in the comments. If you like the video, please feed the algorithm, like, subscribe, share, follow me on Instagram, St. Brian BJJ. Yeah, have a great time doing teaching. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying at this point. Thanks for watching. I truly appreciate you. See you on the mats.